engagement there.
You're listening to Head South Radio with your host, Kat Meyer, a podcast dedicated to prioritizing pleasure and removing the stigma and shame around sex. We're here to be curious and have an open conversation about sexual health and relational wellness. This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes. The information discussed is not a substitute for professional medical advice.
So Emily, we'll get started with a little meditation. If you want to close your eyes or just soften your gaze, allowing your eyeballs to be watery and soft. No need to seek out and perceive the world right now, just kind of starting to go internally. And then root down into your sit bones. So feel your seat. Allow gravity to do some of the work here, dropping into your seat. From that anchored feeling, start to grow tall through the crown of the head, reaching up towards your ceiling. So just allow your shoulder blades to draw towards one another, opening across your collarbone, and then start to just observe your breath. Taking a moment to witness and observe the breath without manipulating it. There's no breath work here. We're just taking the time to witness our breath. And then start to set an intention for the conversation. So however you'd like the next hour to be or feel for you, take a moment to acknowledge that. Hold that in your mind's eye. Envision that with your imagination. Feel that intention. And then when you're ready, just start to blink your eyes open, taking in the light, taking in your space, taking in the screen. Hi, Emily.
Hello. That was wonderful. I definitely needed that. It's been a long day already.
Yeah, truly. I appreciate you joining us today on Head South Radio. To get started, we'll do a little icebreaker. So, would you rather be tied up or tie someone up?
Ooh, that's a fun one. Both? Can we do both?
You absolutely can
tie me up
choose
first,
both.
and then I can tie you up afterwards.
I love that. Out of the 5 senses, which is the most sensual for you?
That's another really great question. Touch. Touch to me is very precious. Yes. I love where our whole body can be an erogenous zone. So touching and feeling everything is key.
Awesome. How do you define intimacy?
Intimacy for me is such a big thing because it can range through so many different types of relationships, but overall it's just these unique connections that you have with somebody else. And when you're in a partnered relationship and a sexual relationship, it is like the special, unique bond and the way that you guys interact with one another.
Yeah, it goes beyond just like what people believe. Like intimacy, people interchange with the word sex.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a part of intimacy, but I love that it's a bigger umbrella and context that goes beyond our romantic relationships, our physical relationships.
Absolutely, yeah.
Intimacy happens with our familiars, our family, our or even our colleagues and our friends and friendships. There's so much of intimacy that happens.
Some of my best intimacy happens within my platonic truly loving, intimate relationships that they're the best.
Same. Yeah. I am so grateful for my friendships and my platonic relationships in equal measure to my romantic ones, because I do learn and grow from both. And
absolutely. I think the hierarchy of relationships can be knocked out a little bit because I think we're all kind of realizing that all of these different relationships are so important for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it takes the pressure off the romantic relationship too.
Absolutely. Yes. One person should not be responsible for giving you everything.
Mm-mm. How do you like to be shown love? And that can be romantic, platonic, familiar. How do you like to be shown love?
I like when other people show up for me. That's a really big thing for me. I feel like I'm a huge giver, and to reciprocate it, and something I love when people think of me for random little things. Like if a friend or lover sends me a picture and they're like, this little thing reminded me of you. that for me just like makes my heart explode. I'm like, oh my God, you thought of me when you didn't need to.
Oh, I love those. I also love those from people like I haven't been close with in a long time.
Yes.
And then like something appears, like even just sending, like memes are a love language to me. And so sending me things that remind you of me or, feel on brand to like me is such a love. It's such a love note. I love a meme. And yeah, that kind of recognition and validation of seeing someone and who they are is really beautiful.
Yeah, no, that absolutely works. I love like when a friend will snap a picture, right? Like if we haven't talked in 6 months and they're like, this looks like your old dog or like something like that.
And then would you rather join the Mile High Club or have a threesome?
I have not joined the Mile High Club yet. I have done the latter. So I guess join the Mile High Club at this point, but I don't know. I'm a little sketched out about flying anyway, so it might not be the best time to force any interaction. But you know what? We'll go with Mile High Club.
Cool. Yeah, I haven't joined the Mile High Club. I would be very curious to join.
I also like the bathrooms are so small that like I don't know if I really feel comfortable. That just I'd have to clean it first, and so we'll see. It had to be the perfect situation.
Yeah, I've read articles too of like from the flight attendants and their take on it. Yeah, good scenario. Private jet.
Private jet would be the perfect situation. Yes. Is that ever going to happen? Probably not.
Yeah.
We're not ruling it out.
Who do you call first when you have great news?
That's okay. I immediately go to my best friend. My mom, definitely. Right now, I don't have a partner, but partners always are somebody who hopefully you want to call when you have great news. But my best friend and my mom, which is a funny thing that like also, as an adult, I'm like, never would have thought that my mom would also be a best friend of mine, but yet here we are.
Yeah, no, same. I call my partner, I like my top 3, not like it's MySpace, but my top 3 on my phone are my partner, my best friend, and my mom.
Yeah.
And like I usually in the morning call one of those 3 and like go on a walk and talk to them, if not all 3. So yeah, definitely when I have great news, I love calling those 3 people.
Yeah, I know. My mom sometimes is like, we've already spoken today. And I'm like, so? What do you mean? You don't want to keep talking to me more? She's like, I'm busy. I feel very lucky that, she's in my top 3.
Mm-hmm. So Emily, I would love for you to introduce who you are and what you do and who you work with.
Yeah, of course. So, hi, everybody listening. My name is Emily. I am a sexuality educator, and you can find me on all socials at Sex Ed by M. It reads as Sexed by M. Read it however you want. Both work. But I am, I know everyone's like, sex, but what is this? And I'm like, no, sex ed, but it's fine. They both work. I'm the founder and the owner of xual Education, and it is a company where I get to educate and support adults on all things sex and sexuality. And really, the idea is that I'm able to create this safe, open space for adults to finally have someone to talk to about all things sex, things that they have, been told that they should feel shamed and, are too taboo to bring up. I hold space for that. And we're able to talk through things, educate you. You're able to learn about what you want to do, things you might be interested that you've never, thought about. And then we work through supporting you, help you reconnect with your pleasure, and ultimately creating the sex life of your dreams.
Love that. Speaking of sex ed, what was your sex education like?
It was rough. It was, to say the least. It was like a teacher, a sub volunteered for it, and he was like an 80-year-old white man.
Oh, wow.
Volunteer, I think just because it was a more permanent role, and it was took place above the gym, and we had to go through like a semester of it one time. And it was just about STDs, pregnancy, and a lot of like undertones of racism. And I think that might have just been him as an 80-year-old white man. I don't remember learning anything except for the fact that women get their periods, and STDs are bad. That's pretty much it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just to give a little context, where are you from or where did you grow up?
I'm from right outside of Boston.
Okay. Northeast.
So
Yeah.
New England.
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay.
I went to a public school, and the school was a great school, but, like a lot of schools, the sex education was lacking. It was the bare minimum, and it was, done by a sub because no one else wanted to tackle it.
Yeah. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I went to a Catholic school and then a public school. So I had Catholic school sex ed in 6th grade. So that's where they like separate the genders and do the videos.
Yep.
And then in high school, it was like the gym teachers kind of did the sex ed, but it was like one of the classes a week or whatever. It was like so minimal, and in the same vein of like, don't get pregnant, don't don't get STDs. Here's how a condom works, but nothing about pleasure, nothing comprehensive, nothing about relational wellness and how to like be intimate with a partner and connect and communicate. None of that for sure.
I mean, and I didn't learn that really anywhere until I started to seek it out. And I was like, oh, there's so much here that I have no idea. And no one's ever told me about, unless you took it upon yourself. So like, for instance, I didn't know that the vulva was called the vulva until a few years ago. And I'm still teaching my friends and peers and people who are older than me. It just is not taught.
Yep. Yeah. And that just stems from people preferring the word vagina or like saying it over saying vulva. Like it's such a weird, like the way that we speak about sex and anatomy and our bodies and our experiences is so bizarre. And it's also where it's rooted from. And a lot of it is rooted in racism. A lot of it is rooted in shame. A lot of it is rooted in old history that just still permeates and dictates how we function.
Yeah.
It's kind of bananas sometimes when I think about it. Yeah.
Coming from a religious background, I'm sure you know better than most, but this idea of purity has really kind of swept across our country, and it's been this way for generations. And so that's what's getting passed down, is this idea of abstaining, and you have to be pure, and it's for the man's pleasure. And so we're kind of getting all like the trickle down effect of that from when, this country was first formed and these religions were brought over. And it's really made us all confused and ashamed. And I think even like the Bumble ad is that just happened. It's so interesting. I feel like is the perfect example of like what we think about sex in this country, and that, some things are demonized but it just like celibacy. The whole ad was confusing as hell to me. I didn't even fully get it.
Yep.
But it's trying to demonize one thing or another. And that's where we started out so wrong in this country. And the thing is that we all need to accept whatever anyone else's preference and choices are, because that's what works best for them. And hopefully we're getting there.
Yeah. Well, I think that is like the Bumble ad is like a very explicit version of like trying to tell women what to do with their bodies, and also shaming the choice. It's like the opposite of slut shaming. And
it's so bizarre to me.
It's so bizarre. And it's also like, wow, way to like tell women what to do with their bodies, way to like disempower them, what they're countering. And so for anybody that doesn't know or isn't aware of, like, the dating app Bumble is trying to rebrand. And what started out as an app where it was like the initiation process starts from women. So it was creating a safe container of dating online for women, so that they take the first step. They take the initiative to pair up with a male counterpart. So this is a very heterosexual dating app.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to rebrand, because I think a lot of dating apps are noticing like people are exhausted by this kind of transaction and this experience of dating online, and like the dehumanizing experience, I think, that a lot of people are going through. And so a lot of women, there's a trend on TikTok where women are taking like, there's like a hashtag for it, but it's like boy free, or like they're going, celibate and choosing celibacy over this like dog and pony show draining experience. It's demoralizing, and it's not what they're actually looking for. What has been now become a checklist and like interview process and very shallow experience. People are pulling away from that. And so Bumble in an attempt to be kind of funny and actually not funny and not actually acknowledging the problem at hand, it started to like created a campaign where they made billboards around LA shaming people for choosing celibacy and saying like, that's not helping. And it was like, whoa, like people choose celibacy for whatever reason they need to. And it's not you, a dating app brand, who should be telling people what's right or wrong. Like, way to be the church.
Yeah.
Like, way to be like that kind of authoritarian, I can't say the word, authority.
Authority.
Like,
yeah.
yeah.
Trying to come in and tell you, you're like, oh, your choices are invalid. Yep.
Yeah. Oof. And so it had a big backlash, and Forbes and The Cut and a lot of publications kind of listened to the people on TikTok and on Instagram kind of being like, what the fuck is this? And so they started reporting on it, and rightfully so, because I think it is in our place as a society. And this is the next topic at hand, is like, as a society, we start shaming people for all of their choices around their sex and their body. And, in a time where like, especially women, females, people who can get pregnant, and our bodies are completely policed depending on what state you're living in. And the choices we have are starting to become smaller and smaller, for a brand, a company, a dating app to tell women what to do and how to, manage their energy, essentially. To me,
For some, celibacy is a safety measure in a state where if they get pregnant, they can't have access to abortion. Yeah. And for you to say, that's not the answer, just go have sex. And it's this whole idea that these outside, bigger sources of power should be telling us how we should be living and feeling and working through our own sex lives. And the reality is that has never worked. What we need to do is give the individual all of the information that they need, and then help them move into a way that makes them feel confident, that works for them as an individual, rather than just saying, yeah, celibacy is not the answer. Everybody, you guys are being silly. Come on the dating app and have sex. It's like, well, that doesn't work for everyone.
It's a very mean, not like mean girls like approach to like bullying. Like literally a dating app is bullying, especially women, because I think it is becoming like a conscious decision of a lot of women who are tired in this dating cycle. It's bullying them and shaming them. And it's like, what in the fuck what is that all about? And so to speak to, what are the common stigmas and shame that you've been kind of helping people unravel as individuals in your work?
That is a great one. A huge one that I think came out of left field for me was men, particularly cis men, but really any penis owner who is having issues and struggling with the size of their penis, erectile dysfunction, feeling like they're incapable or not up to standard, or, whatever they see in porn. Oftentimes where, porn created by men for men often shows a well-endowed gentleman who's like 10 inches or bigger, and they feel inadequate. And so that was something, that I actually, had been taught about and learned a lot about and offer support on, but it was something that people feel a lot more, how can I guess I had kind of almost assumed that most of my clients starting out would be women, and we work on body issues. And that is a huge portion. I'd say like 40%, 60% were men who are coming in just with the same body issues, but pertaining more to their penis. There's a lot of shame around needing to look a certain way, needing to be a certain way. And when you don't fit that mold, you just feel like you're unaccepted, or you should be shunned by society. So that was definitely one that kind of took me surprised, but I have loved working on it with people, because there's so much freedom on the other side of shame to just enjoy your pleasure.
I love that. Ooh, I have like goosebumps from that one, of the freedom that you can experience from releasing that shame. And I love actually too, because I appreciate, the educators and people that I've interviewed who specifically work with, women or men or very gendered work that they're doing. It's incredible. And I appreciate especially people who are helping support women and empowering themselves. But one of those things that I've kind of noticed is like, well, if we're working on one side and empowering, especially in heterosexual relationships, cisgendered relationships, we're working to kind of close, let's say, this pleasure gap, for example, but like you're only informing one half of the puzzle. The other half is also experiencing. And what I've also witnessed, and I'm sure you're witnessing with your clients and the people you're working with, is that like at the end of the day, it's a body issue. It's a societal pressure, and
Yes.
it's a misunderstanding because the media and what we're shown and what we're not told and what we are told, it creates this conflict in the individual, regardless of whether they have a penis, whether they have a vulva, whether they have a clitoris, like whatever their anatomy is.
Yep.
At the end of the day, whatever they're coming up against, whether that's performance anxiety, an issue, lack of libido, all of those things, all kind of, if you like remove all of those details, it comes down to like communication, information, understanding, and giving people the tools and resources they need, and like the truth. Actually, like, here's the truth. It's like there is no measure of size mattering. Actually, in fact, like what we know from porn and what we're seeing visually
Yeah.
is not the reality of sex and your body and what brings your partner's pleasure.
Yep. And what I've found with working with men too, and I work across the board with everybody. And I actually, when I said I had started, I thought I would have more queer and women identifying clients, and about 60% of my clients are men. And I found that, because technically they haven't been the oppressed, even though we have all been fucked by our society and the patriarchy, they know less about it. There's less support out there and information. Oftentimes the oppressed know everything on the topic because they're faced with it every single day, and they have to learn about it to survive. These men are like, what do you mean that this is a thing? What do you mean that, I am feeling ashamed because of what society thinks about me? And they're just starting to, realize what's happening and kind of become aware and come online to it, which is a really cool thing. It's like getting to teach, like you said, that other side, to see how the rest of us have been feeling and dealing with it, and finding community within that too.
Mm-hmm. And validating their experience. Cause I've been met with that as well, of like with the podcast, when I've talked about it, because I'm a cisgendered woman, people believe like, oh, this is your brand is for women, by women. And I'm like, I love brands that do that. I love podcasts that do that. I love educators who are working in that way. But for me, it is all orientations. And I also have been met with people being like, yeah, because we've always, like, everything's always been geared towards men. And you're not wrong. Like when we learn about preventative education, the sex ed that we receive is predominantly geared towards cisgendered men, and like putting a condom on. All of these things are for them. Yes. But at the same time, they are like at the end of they're like the caboose of the train of like understanding and awareness, I think. And they're also going through their own, like you said, like they're living in the society and under these pressures just as much as the rest of us. Yes, they've had the privilege of things being geared in their favor, or information being, created. Like all of our health text was built on healthy
for them, by them.
And like completely disregarding all of their bodies, races, orientation, like everything, everybody else. It was just like, here's how we do fitness. Here's how we do diets. Here's how we do health in general. It's based
the
off
BMI,
of like,
sleep.
All of these studies, all of this information is created around their bodies, around their understanding and experience in the world. But that doesn't mean that the relational understanding, the pressures that they experience, the anxieties that they experience aren't any more valid than anybody else in this, right? We're all experiencing the weight of this. And so I appreciate practitioners like yourself, educators like yourself, who, you're open to all people coming to you to kind of talk about sex and kind of help find their pleasure, find their, relate better to their partners, relate better to themselves. I really appreciate so much the work that you do.
Thank you. Well, I love it. And honestly, like a lot of it came from personal experience of being able to hold space for men, because, we talk a lot about, we live in a world that's made for them. And I, up until like, I'd say 8 years ago, held a lot of frustration about that. Like I was like, very on the side of like, fuck a lot of men, like fuck them. I'm so sick of this patriarchy in this world we live in. And it's harder for us. And I wasn't seeing individuals. I was seeing the patriarchy when I looked at a man who was insecure or, you know, who had body issues. And my mind would immediately go, well, everything's built for you, so you just need to get over it. And a lot of like my own deconstructing of like, okay, learning about how this society shames all of us. We're all getting fucked by it.
Mm-hmm.
A book that I read was For the Love of Men, just like blew my mind and was so helpful and really healing, and to be like, okay, all of our anxieties and our negative emotions and the shame are, like you said, so valid. Like no one is really getting the upper leg at the end of the day, unless maybe we're talking about money wise. But when we're talking about like self-love, pleasure, body acceptance, we're all getting fucked over.
And even community. So because
Yeah.
we are like, the further out into the margins we go with people, and people who are more marginalized, they actually have stronger community, and they have the
Yep.
skill sets, like you said, like we've had to, because we had to survive. And so the people who are oftentimes the revolutionaries, the people who are exacting change and advocating for change and fighting the good fights out there and bringing these things to light, are also the people who know and have the ability to communicate, and have to, out of survival, have had to historically build community, build these networks. Whereas I think cisgendered, especially white men, don't have that. Like when I talk to people in my life who are cisgendered men, it is so hard for them to find community, to find someone they can
Yep.
confide in. Like I've witnessed so many men, including my own exes, go through breakup and then have no one to turn to. And when I go through a breakup,
Yes.
like we said earlier, who do we call when we have great news? Who do I call when I have bad news? My
Yep.
motherfucking mom, like everybody, like my network of girlfriends. Like I have
Yep.
a strong community of
Yeah.
women and supporters and male friends as well. So when those things start to kind of unravel for me, I have the support, and I notice and witness so many men who don't have that support system. They might have a bro best friend who they go and golf with. They might have a running buddy. They might have something, but they don't have that support system around them. And I know, I don't know the statistics around it, but there is statistics around the fact that like men, when they retire, it's within 10 years, a lot of them die of heart attacks. And I think it's the heart attack is coming from loneliness. I think it's
Yep.
coming from a lack of compassion, a lack of like looking around going, okay, I've been in this mode. I've been provider. I have to do. And then once they retire, they look at like if they're with a wife, a female partner, they're looking at her and she's got her friends. She's got her life. She's still maybe probably a little bit younger in certain circumstances. Like she's still doing her thing. And he's retired and has no support system around
Yep.
him, and no hobbies, nothing that kind of fuels his creative energy, his
Yeah.
expression, like
Because his
self-expression.
value has always been said that it's in making money and being a boss. I mean, this conversation keeps coming back to the patriarchy, because the patriarchy tells us that like autonomy and being independent is the like strong, superior, and masculine thing that we should be doing. And everyone should achieve for that. And it's really about like not needing anyone and being able to stand on your own, and that like lone wolf mentality. Whereas on the opposite, connection has always been seen as weaker and more feminine. But connection is what is literally biologically keeping us alive longer.
Truly.
And I think that it's so beautiful. Our generation, I truly believe it's starting, you know, with the older millennials, and we're realizing that. And the science is here where we're like, no, we need connection, just like an infant needs support and love. Like an infant, if you feed it, if you change it, if you do all the basic things, it will still die of loneliness. If you do not give it like skin to skin contact and all of the things to connect, we need it throughout our entire life. That doesn't stop. It just changes in different ways.
Yeah. And that is irregardless of gender and
Yep.
orientation, like those things.
Yeah.
As humans, just humans living on this planet, we need connection. We need compassion. We need to see one another. We need to feel validated, and we need to allow ourselves to be vulnerable.
Yeah, which is something, I mean, I struggled with being from Boston. Like, talk about the most like masculine New England. For those who have never been to New England, there's kind of this old rooted concept that like we all need to be like very individual and just like say fuck you to everyone else around us, and, you know, go out and do our own and make money and not talk about any emotions. And so coming from that, I really didn't want to rely on anyone else. I never wanted to ask for help. I didn't want to be vulnerable. I didn't even know what that meant until like coming into my 20s and not being able to function as an adult, like, and realizing like, oh, this is not working for me. Something really needs to change here. And a lot of that was like, okay, learning about what community means and how to let people love me and how to love them back, and, you know, flow between like autonomy and community and be able to balance those two things. So yeah, it's something that I see a lot in my clients where I'm like, I've been there, I've done that. I feel like I'm on the other side, and it's still every day is, you know, something new. You're working through something every day, both good and bad.
Let's take a quick break. Back in 2012, I made the bold decision to ditch traditional shampoo, and I've never looked back. How did I do it, you ask? With Hair Story New Wash. This product is not just a shampoo or conditioner, it's a unique all-in-one solution that gently cleanses your hair while maintaining its natural balance. No more harsh chemicals stripping away your hair's vitality. Hair Story New Wash uses a carefully crafted blend of essential oils, aloe vera, and fatty acids that cleanse and nourish your hair without any of the harmful stuff you find in traditional products. Here's a little secret. I used to work at Hair Story from 2013 to 2017, and even after that, I couldn't find anything that compares. This is a product I truly believe in, and that's why I'm excited to share it with you today. As a listener of our podcast, by using the link we provided in the episode notes, you'll get an exclusive 15% off your first purchase of Hair Story New Wash. Say goodbye to the shampoo bottle clutter and hello to healthier, more vibrant hair with Hair Story New Wash. Click the link, enjoy the discount, and give your hair the love it deserves.
Not all lubes are created the same. Here at Head South, we've worked diligently to pare down the ingredients so there is no fuss and no unnecessary bits and bobs. Head South intimacy serums make it simple and easy for you to reduce friction and enhance pleasure. Listeners can get 20% off their first order of a starter kit using the code PODCAT24. That's PODCAT24. And now, back to the episode.
I wanted to go over some other myths and see what your take is on it and like kind of myth bust here.
Love myth. Yes. Give it to me. Yes.
First myth, sex should always be mind-blowing.
I wonder where that one comes from. I think that comes probably a little bit from the porn industry. There's this idea that like sex should be orgasmic. And there's also this twisted idea of like, okay, what is sex? And so when I start with a lot of my clients, I'm like, hey, what is sex? And that question alone, a lot of people are like, it's really difficult to answer because there's a lot of different answers and it's very unique. And so when I look at sex and when we try to look at sex in a positive mindset, it's connection through sexual activities, whether that's kissing, whether that's touching. And it does not mean penetration and orgasm. It's fun when it's mind-blowing, sure. But that is just one tiny piece of a giant puzzle. So that one needs to totally be busted because then it also leaves people feeling like they're doing something wrong or they're less than. I don't know if you've ever read the book Come As You Are, but it's an amazing book talking about women and this pressure to like have this is just one part, but orgasm every time. And a lot of women, a high percentage, have never experienced an orgasm and then immediately think there's something wrong with them. But truth is, sex can be just about connection in the moment if you want it. Or it can be mind-blowing if you need it. Or it's a flow. There's everything that you can do. And yeah, no, that one's out.
Yep.
That one's got to go.
That's a big myth.
Yeah.
Myth number 2, men always want sex.
This is another one that I see often with my clients. Mm-hmm. So they'll come to me and they'll say, there's something wrong. My libido has dropped down. And immediately I'm like, okay, well, what are the top, few needs? Are you more stressed? Have you been sleeping okay? What's your diet like? Have there been any big changes in your life? There's no such thing. And some people sure might want sex all the time, but we go through ups and downs in our lives, and sex and our desire and arousal is based off so many different things. It's impossible to want sex all the time unless you truly live the most stress-free life. because our arousal system takes place in our nervous system. And so when our nervous system is triggered, fight, flight, freeze, our arousal system has a very hard time coming through. And so it's so natural to go through periods when you are interested, when you're not interested, when you're like, I could go with or without it. It does not mean that they're broken in any way.
I think it's such a terrible myth because it puts so much pressure on men.
Yes.
That they have, like, it puts a performative pressure on them. But it
Yep.
also, if in a heterosexual couple, it can lead to a female feeling like you're not attracted to me. Like when a
Yeah.
man isn't always turned on or doesn't always want to have sex or is experiencing like erectile dysfunction or performance
Yep.
anxiety, all of those things layer on another pressure for the partnership because there is that myth and a belief that like men should always be turned on. And then
Absolutely.
like then,
Yep.
you know, the cycle of like not communicating about that or fighting about it or feeling
Yep.
rejected it's a terrible, terrible myth. Like,
Yeah. I mean, and one of my clients, particular stories coming to mind is they've been having trouble with losing their erection mid-sex.
Mhm.
And we've been talking a lot about what that means for them, why they feel shame around it. And the reality is that their partner has then said to them, oh, it's because you're not desiring me. It's because there's something wrong. You're not desiring me. I'm doing something wrong. So they're internalizing that pain. And it's a two-way street. It's like, okay, teaching penis owners that it's okay that to have, different libidos, it jumps, it flows. And then it's also on the other side, teaching the partner of that like, it does not mean that you're doing something wrong. Everyone's got a lot of shame because sex is not talked about. So we feel so uncomfortable around it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the only, like you mentioned earlier, the only visual example of sex we see is either in media. So like in movies, television, as well as porn.
Yep.
And none of those show this kind of actual realistic dynamic of like consent, conversations, things
Yep.
like things not happening the way that it's not this escalator and all of a sudden explosive. And then everyone's
Yep.
like awkwardly, like I always think of the movies where then all of a sudden like there's clothes everywhere, everyone's ripping their clothes off and it's all smooth. And then all of a sudden it's fireworks and then they're in bed, like smoking cigarettes. Like it's kind of like that.
Did you ever watch The Witcher?
No, what is that?
Okay, so I'm a big fantasy girly. I've grown up like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings. So it's a fantasy TV show on Netflix.
Okay.
With Henry Cavill. I don't know how to say his last name. Cavill?
Like Superman, right? Like he was Superman at one point? Okay.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I loved the TV show.
Mm-hmm.
However, these sex scenes were driving me insane. Like it was so rip your clothes off, 1-2 pump, everyone orgasms type thing. And it almost made me stop watching it because I'm like, I love these characters so much and just give us a little bit of reality here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, granted, it's fantasy and there's witches and, whatever, monster slayers. But like, come on, this is what people are seeing and being like, okay, why is that not happening to me? There must be something wrong with me.
Yeah, I'm not measuring up to that, any of that.
I don't know the last time 3 pumps somebody immediately orgasmed.
Yeah.
If you ever have, please let me know because I would love, to hear more of your stories.
Yeah. How does that work?
Yes.
Another myth is, this is kind of funny. You can't get pregnant if you have sex standing up, during your period, or in water.
I don't know. I'm so curious to know the origins of these because I swear to God, I feel like somebody probably was pranking somebody else and they were like, let me just say something just to like see if they
believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see how gullible my friend can be. And then somebody just shared it to everyone.
Yeah.
Okay. You can get pregnant in all of those cases.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a little bit harder when you're in water, sure, especially a hot tub, highly chlorinated things could kill some sperm, but no, still can happen. Also, I don't know why people are having sex in pools and that kind of water. It's hard and also can cause UTIs and yeast infections. So
Because
you're into it.
I'm like, because movies.
Yeah, because we see it and we're like, that looks so sexy. Let me try it. And then you try it and you're like, this is not working out very well.
Everything is burning because of chlorine.
Everything's burning. Yes, everything's burning. And also like the water doesn't make things, it's
not
anti-slippery.
A lubricant. It's not a lubricant. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, that one's, I swear it's just somebody trying to pull somebody else's leg.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's kind of the thing where like, if you pull out quick enough, you get sperm can live for up to 5 days. So there is a smaller window with the period, like the ovulation window is around 6 to 7 days. So technically speaking, it is a little bit harder during your time around your period, but it definitely can still happen.
It's funny. I was just talking to a girlfriend about that of like, they made us believe, and I think this is because I went to a Catholic school. That was my first round of sex ed. They made us believe that like someone with a penis looking at you can get you pregnant. Like that's how, kind of just explicitly saying like, rather than educating us on our menstrual cycle and how to kind of like track our cycle
fear
and know
monger
our
you.
just be afraid and like just
be
always
scared.
be scared. Just always be scared.
Yeah. But then when you get married, you should have sex every night to please your husband.
Yes. Yeah. The expectations. And then it's like, no wonder people like, I'm about to be 40 and I have a lot of girlfriends, a lot of people going through fertility journeys and coming off of birth control and not like just being so scared and so uncomfortable and not knowing their own bodies. And I was like, this is all stems back to 2 decades ago when, you know, our sex education failed us. We were put on birth control without giving like the full extent of what happens to our bodies and not fully understanding. A lot of young people. And I loved, my mom took me to the gynecologist when I told her I was ready to have sex. So we had the full conversation about all the different birth control options.
That.
And so I was really grateful. That was the better part of my sex education came from my mother and my gynecologist and like empowering me with choices. And so I went on birth control for myself. Like I made that choice. But I also at 28 decided to come off of it because I was like, I recognized it didn't feel good in my body.
Yeah.
And I started to learn other methods of birth control for myself and working with a partner and kind of having open communication around our birth control options was really important. And I think a lot of people aren't given that information, aren't given that opportunity. And then we're misguided in the beliefs of like how easily we can get pregnant and how not easy we can get pregnant. And when it's like, there's actually like, there's a method and a timing to all of these things, and understanding your body and your cycle is the best way to prevent as well as to allow pregnancy to happen. Like it's
absolutely. And I mean, and I want to speak too on that, like, even as a sexuality educator, so I still have an IUD. I've been wanting to get it out, but there's still fear. Like I still, you know, and I have learned so much more, and I know that I have so much more to go to learn. And it's so sad to me, you know, that like that we were robbed of that education and that ability and right to choose what's best for our bodies because we were given limited education on it. And so that's what I try to do for adults now, where I'm like, hey, come to me. Let's figure things out. We can talk through everything. See what, you know, boundaries you need to put up. See where the shame comes from, because we all deserve to have a space like that.
And I also just wanted to share this too of, you just made me think of that, of like, as a young woman or someone on birth control, it behooves you to communicate with your partner about your birth control, how much you're spending on birth control. Like if you have to pay out of pocket for things, like I used to do that all the time. Like I'd save the receipt and show my boyfriends. Like,
I love that.
Because I think that's the other thing is that like, it's all put on women in heterosexual relationships to kind of manage the birth control component, and yet their counterparts, their partners aren't privy to this and don't understand like the, you know, what happens to us emotionally, physically, our bodies, and like we're choosing this for both parties. And it's one of those things of like, I'm like, disclose that, share that, tell them, send them a bill.
I mean,
like,
I feel like the most accurate way to just kind of summarize that is when the same year Viagra came out, a woman's version came out. We know what happened with Viagra, blew up. The woman's version only sold a couple hundred scripts. Male birth control has come out. On the opposite side, you'd think like, okay, yes, men, they want to step up to the plate. No. A lot of them have not, or are not even open to considering the idea of male birth control. And like, it still is a huge discrepancy amount between the expectation of women to get on it versus men to get on it. And a lot of men are not interested in doing it. I mean, I have male friends and they're like, no way. Immediately shut it down without even hearing about it. Yep. And that's because of the way that we've been taught that for men, sex and sexuality and all that is for pleasure. For women, it's responsibility, having babies, menstruating.
The I think just to add on that of the pressures, and also men, like men have the option to opt out of that and be like, no way, like without knowing. I've heard some men be like, have you seen the symptoms? Like, no way. And it's like, what? Like, are you like, do you know what symptoms we experience by going on birth control, and how many different versions and the different hormones I've had to switch and like upgrade, downgrade, move through my 20s is so frustrating. To then they won't even have the conversation. They won't even try or think about it. Consider having to go on some form of birth control. It's also the idea of, you know, there is this correlation with, well, what happens if I then can't, it affects my ability to, do
My
the things that I'm
fertility.
supposed to do. Yeah. Their
Yep.
fertility, their virility
Yeah.
is at stake. And so there is that fear of like, well, what happens if I can't later have kids? Or even like with vasectomy, like, there's certain reversible
Yep.
vasectomies, and, men are scared to do that because like, what happens if it doesn't work? And, that speaks to what we were talking about earlier of like, they have their own set of pressure and their own, underlying beliefs that are insidious and, preventing them from supporting their partners. Let's do one more myth busting. Sex should always be easy and natural.
Yes, that is a huge one. And I feel like all of my clients have that belief, or they're like, things shouldn't feel this complicated. And one of the biggest things is a lot of times I recommend people to plan sex, put it on your schedule, and people don't want to because they want it to just happen naturally. They want it to be spontaneous because that's what we've been told, is that it should just come up natural. And in books and in movies, cool. That like plays nicely into this like fun, I don't know, we want to watch a movie that necessarily isn't challenging. It's hot. It's sexy to look at. I think like Mr. and Mrs. Bond is a great example of that. Like they're just showing us, oh, you should just automatically know when your partner wants to have sex and then you both can go at it. The reality is life is not that easy. Humans are not mind readers. We need to communicate with one another. And sometimes things are going to be awkward. Like such is life. If we move through life with such ease, then things wouldn't be as exciting. We need some of that, like, yin and yang to kind of balance things out. Yeah, that idea really limits people from also bringing toys in, from adding lube. I think a lot of people, really, one of my biggest suggestions is add lube. Always have lube in your side table. And people are like, well, I should normally get aroused and have fluids. And it's like, sure. But sometimes when you're feeling a little bit more stressed or dehydrated, your body might not naturally do that. And that's okay. It's okay that we have these weird ups and downs. Like that's what makes it enjoyable and fun and playful. Like I think if there's one word that I like to use to summarize sex, it should be playful. It's a place where we can come together in a safe environment and just experience and try and enjoy.
I love, because earlier we were talking about like structuring and planning sex and people being adverse to that. And it actually having that container, it's funny because everything else we do in our lives is structured and planned.
Yep.
You don't just show up at a friend's house. Like there's so much, like the modern age that we live in is so structured that spontaneity doesn't actually happen. Coincidence happens and like you run into someone and you're like, oh, wow, great. But, when it comes to sex, just like everything else, like dining with your partner, coordinating with another human requires effort. But then from that effort, we allow playfulness. So it kind of goes hand in hand. Like you have to kind of create a boundaries, structure, container. And that might mean blocking out a period of time for sex or for like just cuddling or doing things intimately with a partner. And also I love your, suggestion of having lubes, intimacy serums, toys. That brings the playfulness, and having those readily available. Like that's something that has always been a part of my sex life. I'm really grateful. Like when I started having sex at 17, all of my partners always had condoms and
I love that
available.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so I thought that was the norm. And then in my 30s, I was talking to girlfriends and they were like, no, I've never used it. And then I've also talked to girlfriends and found out like a lot of them were having painful sex or were struggling with BV, UTIs, and yeast infections and abrasions, and like just kind of swallowing that and not communicating or like avoiding sex altogether because things were painful down there, instead of just having lubes and intimacy serums on the nightstand. And so that's why I created Head South products, because I was like, this can't be something relegated to a certain stage of life. So a lot of people do that. Like that's a myth of like using lubes is for when you go through menopause,
Yep.
perimenopause,
Postmenopausal. Yep.
postmenopausal. And it's like, no, I mean, exactly to that point of like during different times of the month, during different times of stress, just, not being as hydrated, like just whatever it is, coming off of medication, going on antibiotics, whatever it is in my body, there are periods of time where like just a little extra moisture helps and soothes and feels good and allows for more play, allows for more adventure with partners when you have those things just readily available. They don't have to always be used every encounter, but to destigmatize that is something I'm very much an advocate for. Like, we got to stop thinking that this is like something that has to fix a problem. It's a product to enhance an experience.
Yes. And toys are your friends. Like, they are not your competition.
Mm-hmm.
Like, bring them in all. I imagine just like, I want you next time you play sexually with a partner, just to have toys all over the place.
Yeah. And enjoy.
Free to grab at any moment.
Yep. Enjoy, experience, explore. So that's my next question for you is, how does someone, if a client comes to you and they're like, I'm curious and I want to try and introduce kink into my sex life, both by myself and partnered, what is your advice to kind of move towards kink for someone?
I love this one. Kink has been such a fun adventure for me as an educator. My first client was into something called stething. So sexual play with a stethoscope. And it was something, I mean, I went through, I have my degree. I went through 18 months of training and education. Hadn't heard of it. Kink is so exciting because there's always something new. And what we do when you come in and you're like, I have this kink I want to try. We first work through like, okay, let's learn as much about it as possible. Let's deal with any blocks that might be coming up for you. So a lot of people are like, hey, let's use over like BDSM, for example. Mm-hmm. I want to try some really rough play. Mm-hmm. So we would talk about like, what does that look like to you? Let's create some boundaries, what you imagine that being, what your hard stops are, your like yeses and your goes are. Like, let's create this kind of like just list, more or less, like worksheet of like, what does this look like for you? How can you communicate that? And then how do you implement it? And when you go to implement it, a lot of time we have blocks. There's shame, there's awkwardness. So let's work through those blocks. Where are they coming up for you? What's holding you back so that you can go out there and just like fully live your kinky, like best life. And kinks they're just so much fun. They're endless, truly. And it really like comes down to also communication. What I love about the kink community is they have their communication down like no one else I've ever seen it. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No,
I've learned really so much from them.
Truly. Yeah. I was just going to say I have learned in the past 2 years doing Head South and working in this realm of like the kink BDSM community. There's so much for us to all learn around communication, around listening, paying attention and being fully present, like through the work of kink and through how they set their boundaries and how they communicate. It's one of them, like speaking of like a marginalized, something that was so shamed is absolutely the influence of the culture and like should continue to do so. Cause I think there's so much we can learn from those practices.
I just sat in on a really fun BDSM workshop and we spent half the time learning about how to look for your partner's shutdown signals that are nonverbal signals. So oftentimes, people have like a safe word, right? Mm-hmm. Or they have like their red light system, red, orange, green, like good to go, or, I'm slowing down, we need to stop. But sometimes people go nonverbal when the body shuts down, let's say if you're overstressed or overstimulated. And so this workshop that I had gone into just thinking we were going to talk about fun, interesting new ways to play in BDSM, half of it was talking about how to look for those nonverbal signals. I mean, it's such a loving community and such a supportive, inclusive community that like kink is great. If you're curious about anyone out there listening, trying to play out a kink, wanting to learn more, I really suggest Munches in your area. I don't know if you've ever heard of a munch.
No.
So it is usually, they're hosted, you can usually find them on a website called FetLife, which go about, internet browsing as you normally would in your safest way possible. Be aware that not every internet, is safe overall. That's what I'll say about that. But munches are usually held in bigger cities by kinky communities. And you can go and literally meet people for a lunch out in public and talk about things that you're interested in, ways you want to play, maybe find a new partner, somebody who can do like a session with you. It's a really cool community.
I love that. That's amazing. That's incredible. I hadn't heard
There's
of that.
so many in LA. They are everywhere.
That's very cool. Yeah. That's such a great, I love that. Emily, we're going to be wrapping up. And so I would love for you to share with our listeners where they can find you, any workshops, anything that you're doing, projects that you want to share. Yeah. Let them know where they can find you.
Yeah. So I am on all social, I'm on TikTok and Instagram at Sex Ed by M. I also have a website that is www.sexedbym.com. You can also access it. My company is called actually Xual Education, and xualeducation.org is another way to access my website. I thought it was a really clever pun with swelling, as the body does. But yeah, so I see, I know when I created, I was like, oh my God, am I a genius? But it's so stupid. But yeah, I see adults one-on-one online. So you can always reach out to me there. I do free first sessions for anyone who is interested. I have a couple downloadable ebook guidebooks that are already out, and coming out, I worked with another sexuality educator to create an Anal 101 guidebook. That's going to be really fun. So you can check them all out on my socials or my website, and DM me if you ever have any questions. I try to answer people every day.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time out and sharing your wisdom, your knowledge. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, this was so much fun, really. Thank you. And thank you for hosting a space like this, because it is so needed.
Thank you. Special thanks to all of our guests. Head South is hosted by Kat Meyer, produced by Isis Barlow, edited by Megan Hook, with music by Lily Rezi Rothman, graphics by Ella Chodos Irvine, cover art by Gina Ship Casey, and intro by Murph Meyer.